I'm going to show you what can be done with a few basic cabins in one of the hottest markets in the US. But what really makes this deal stand out is, well, we got paid $55,000 to take over the property. It hit break even in just 4 months, and now just 7 months after closing, we're on track to generate nearly $16,000 each month. Now, after filming and during the editing of this very video, I received a message in our Discord community from Nathan showing that we are even exceeding our best case scenario and hitting nearly $20,000 in bookings for September and another $15,000 for October as of September 2nd. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through how we found this gem, how we did the numbers, and how we negotiated the seller to actually pay us to take the property off their hands. And if we play our cards right, we could see a $1 million return in the next 12 months since we've already created over $200,000 in equity and cash flows in just a few months. I'll break down the whole process and the math that got us here.
Let's freaking go!
Now, I'd like to introduce you to one of our latest projects in Ohio. Located on 7 acres, this property has signs of potential, but also some very big hurdles to overcome. The land comes equipped with 3 income-producing doors that are already up and running, and just not that well, but we'll get into that later. The real important thing here is that there's a lot of potential in the existing cabins and the land has ample room to expand. Now, this property is just a short drive away from the main entrance to Hocking Hills State Park and surrounded by several other popular attractions. And even if it may feel like it's not a good thing, we're also surrounded by other high-performing properties too. I'll tell you later why this is both a good and a bad thing. Now, this area might not be as famous as the Grand Canyon, Zion, or even Joshua Tree National Parks, but it sees nearly the same number of visitors each and every year, between 4 to 5 million tourists looking for adventure, relaxation, and most importantly for us, top-notch, unique accommodations for themselves, their families, and their friends. Now, we all want to book a place that looks amazing in photos, but how often does that reality fall short? It's like getting a catfished on a dating app. Looks great online, but the real thing, not so much. I'm always looking at new homes and new properties, and this is just a very common thing that we see in real estate. Now, we prefer to underpromise and overdeliver, and that's exactly how we stumbled upon this property in Ohio. Now, you might be wondering, why invest in a flyover state like Ohio? Isn't it just another cornfield-filled, middle-of-nowhere place? I know, Ohio isn't exactly on everyone's radar, but bear with me, because it should be. Here's why Ohio made the cut. First, a quick flight from New York. Second, it's drivable if needed. Third, it's a high-performing or high-potential area. Fourth, offers significant equity gain. 5, there are expansion opportunities with multiple doors. And then lastly, 6, it's a place we'd actually like to visit. Now, we started first by running the numbers, gathering data, and identifying hotspots that were known destinations based on our research. Then we narrowed it down by calculating something that I call the demographic travel density. When I first figured out this number, my whole real estate game changed. I shifted from making $300, maybe $500 a month to netting $5,000 to $10,000 per month on the same piece of property. It's really a simple ratio. The number of visitors to an area divided by its square miles. For example, Texas Hill Country gets about 34 million visitors a year, spread across approximately 31,000 square miles, for a ratio of about 1,100 visitors per square mile. In this Ohio location, we have around 4.5 million visitors annually across roughly 200 square miles, for a ratio of 22,500 visitors per square mile. Now, this funneling effect means a large crowd in a relatively small area, all looking for somewhere to stay. We like those odds. Now, there's a lot more stuff that we dig into, and we have plenty of options in alternative real estate. I like to call this land hacking, like what we're gonna be doing here with these 7 acres. These kinds of investments aren't typically talked about, let alone taught in schools. And honestly, if they're teaching us how to structure a sentence correctly, they should at least be giving us the basics of investing too. But maybe that's just me. Now, the property we're talking about today is just a stone's throw away from Hocking Hills State Park in Logan, Ohio. And this is Nathan, a proud member of our Land Hacker program and the owner and entrepreneur behind these 7 acres. Hey Nathan, how's it going?
Good. Hey, Kai. How are you?
Now, Nathan works on the front lines in the medical field in New York City, but on the side, he's quickly becoming a savvy land investor, remodeler, and professional host. Prior to this property, Nathan actually didn't have any experience in real estate as an investor, construction, or short-term rentals, but what Nathan learned and got done in 7 months is probably the equivalent to a 4-year degree in real estate, investing, and business. And if you're thinking about doing something similar, his story is incredibly motivating. It might just give you the push you need for your next project. And if you're ready to move forward and want more guidance from me, my team, and community of people just like Nathan, schedule a call with us. Link is just down below. Now, after months of sifting through deals and nearly closing on a few others, Nathan landed on a 7-acre property with 3 underperforming, neglected cabins. Each cabin was pulling in about $30,000 per year with lukewarm reviews. Due to the poor management, they were only netting approximately $5,000 for the entire year. And most of that was because of just outrageous management fees, where it was essentially wiping out all profitability. Now, rarely are property management companies really worth it. That's why I prefer to build out my own teams and systems. You end up having more control and they can cost a whole lot less. And that's one of the systems that Nathan is putting in place to make this property work. But at this point, this wasn't even catfishing. I think the previous owner just didn't care anymore. But looking back at the property, the location is prime, and after crunching the numbers, we all saw the potential. Short and skinny of the plan: save money, spruce up the first 2 cabins as best as possible, relaunch them, and then do a full remodel on the third. The staggered approach helps us spread out the cost, break even quickly, and then focus on improvements and expansion. The goal is to double the performance within a year, aiming for $10,000 to $15,000 per month, and eventually hitting $175K per year with the first 3 cabins, and then netting closer to $55,000 a year instead of $5,000. Not a bad place to start, but that is just phase 1. Future phases including adding 4 more high-end unique doors, stabilizing cash flows, and getting a new valuation for the business. Just like a home, this business has inherent value, which is traded at a cap rate. And that value in the next 12 months, it's going to be somewhere between $1.3 million and $2 million. A lot of that depends on market conditions, but it's nice to see that Nathan is already creating equity. And that's one thing I love about this business. It doesn't matter who designed your tiles or who your architect was. At the end of the day, all that really matters is your net operating income. But before we dive deeper into the numbers, let's start with how Nathan found this property and negotiated to get paid $55,000 to take it over, and what he might have done differently. So, Nathan, how did you finally decide upon this property?
So it was a long time searching. Definitely looked through a couple of different markets, but we ended up landing on this one after looking at a couple different markets and having some different ideas of, where we wanted to land.
Gotcha. Okay. And then when you're looking at the different markets, what brought you to decide on this ultimately?
Partly was the revenue. The other part of it was what we learned in your course with zoning and permitting. We definitely had more of an ability to land hack in Hocking Hills because of lack of regulations, lack of zoning. So that kind of made it ideal for what we were planning on doing in this environment.
Okay, so what was the actual zoning of this property?
There was no zoning when we were looking. Everything was zoned agricultural, but there were no specific restrictions with each zoning.
Gotcha. So you're really free to basically do what you want to do, and including what you wanted to build.
Yep.
Now, Nathan used one of our frameworks to find his ideal spots and worked closely with me and my team to negotiate, underwrite, and make sure everything checked out before pulling that trigger and committing to a property. And really, to give credit where credit is due, Nathan really did an amazing job tracking down this deal, navigating the entire due diligence phase, and then really confirming and running the numbers. And to be real, negotiations were a bit of a back and forth, but Nathan used one of our tactics, leveraging a property under contract and then renegotiating terms and price based on the findings during the due diligence phase. And that's how we get massive discounts like this property, where I negotiated $370,000 off the asking price during a seller's market. Nathan, why don't you take us through how you negotiated to get $55,000 back by purchasing this property?
So we came into this property at, I guess, a good timing for us. We were actually looking at a different property that I was betting with you. That one actually fell through, and our realtor proposed this one right afterwards. So the timing was great. But she was actually the one that kind of, walked us through, like, this is the situation that the sellers are in. They're kind of struggling with a couple of loans. They have like a blanket loan over a couple of different properties. So we came in at a good time, and they were willing to negotiate a little bit. So even if we gave them their full purchase price, they were willing to work with us after the loan closed. So they were going to give us a second home loan, or what's the word I'm trying to say?
Second position.
Second position lien. Yeah. So they had a second position lien on the property, and they were able to give us $300K after closing because we said we would give it back to them in about 5 years.
Gotcha.
Having not everything go right into the down payment and just having to raise money right afterwards definitely took off a lot of the pressure.
Yeah, for sure. So Nathan, working with his team, found a win-win solution considering the seller's extreme motivation to offload the property. He also understood the circumstances. He locked in even more favorable terms with the seller financing and ended up acquiring this property with no money down, and he can focus his finances on building out the property to increase equity, get the tax savings, and then ultimately get the cash flow. All right, so knowing everything that you know now, Nathan, if you can go back in time and give yourself advice 7 months ago, so if we can go back to like December, January time period, what would you tell yourself?
When I do have downtime, I would focus my learning on things that weren't approaching as quickly as I thought they were. So like we weren't thinking about after launch, after listing right away. Like we kept thinking, okay, we have a little bit of time. So we're focusing more on furnishing and the construction part and making sure all of our finances and everything were set up. So we didn't focus as much on guest relations or channel manager or price labs, all of that stuff. So going back, if I had the knowledge to go back and tell myself that, I would definitely focus more on learning those things. That way I wasn't in as much of a time crunch when time came to actually start.
By the way, if you want a really romantic trip out to Ohio, go check out Nathan's cabins. His Airbnb link is just down below. Once someone like Nathan is ready to add land and a short-term rental to their portfolio, the next natural question is, how do you get started? Nathan's goals and ambitions probably resonate a lot with you. He was living in a big city with a solid job. Obviously, Nathan is smart and capable, but he couldn't imagine working for a paycheck for the rest of his life. He wanted to build a high-performing portfolio. So after plenty of trial and error, Nathan joined our mentoring program and community to accelerate his search and avoid common pitfalls of purchasing land and trying to develop or create high-end rentals. And after attending several classes, coaching sessions, and working with our community, Nathan felt confident he'd found the right location and property. Now, part of that process involved building our financial models and analyzing 3 key metrics: break even, payback period, and margins. And boy, did Nathan do his homework. You just mentioned something earlier about the revenues that also helped you make the decision. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what do you mean you liked the revenues?
So when we were looking at competition in the area, the top properties were producing, for lack of better words, crazy numbers. So since we had 3 cabins that we can optimize, we thought we can compete pretty well with those.
So using a structure to systematically determine our band of revenue potential was really key to Nathan's decision. Part of that process is to look at other competitors in the area. Now, this not only can show how crowded or oversaturated a specific area is, but also the level of foot traffic and popularity. Now, the line between popularity and oversaturation is a thin one. We want to be mindful of the data before slapping one of those labels on an area if you haven't done the rest of the underwriting or analysis yet. This was crucial not only for cash flow reasons, but also for upgrades and updates. And given Nathan's budget, we couldn't do full rehabs on all 3 cabins. Plus, that would have been too risky. So we decided to upgrade what we could in 2 cabins, get them back online ASAP, and then do a full rehab on the 3rd. The strategy allowed us to start chipping away at monthly carrying costs while learning about our target demographic and our new market. Nathan had a budget due to lending of approximately $250,000 to upgrade the cabins, and ultimately this is how it broke down. This includes the construction, carrying costs, and furnishings. So we were able to get pretty darn close. Now, depending on how the 3rd cabin performs, we can always go back and spruce up the other 2. That's the plan anyways. Launching a new listing is always tricky in the first few months, but we aim to break even with the first 3 cabins, giving us basically a free property to expand and create something truly unique. But after running the numbers, not only did this seem feasible, it looked extremely likely. Now, after launching the first 2 cabins in June of this summer, the property quickly became a guest favorite, and we hit break even early while the 3rd cabin was still under construction. And as of now, the final cabin has launched about a week ago, and the bookings are rolling in, and they're already outperforming the first 2 cabins. Now, you can see the progressive growth over the last few months, and our plan that we put in place is performing better than we expected. Not only did our proof of concept work, but now it's given us evidence and the finances to remodel the other 2 cabins and start construction on the new sites. All of this within 7 months of acquiring the property. Not too bad. Now, the first 2 cabins, named Caillou and the Nest, are each generating just over $5,000 per month. The new cabin Conso is already on pace to beat that this month by bringing a total monthly revenue from this property to just under $16,000. Not bad in 7 months from closing, including all the construction and furnishing and prep work that we had to do. Now, while we're heading into winter, we still expect to pull in approximately $8,000 to $10,000 per month because we have another great peak in October for the changing of leaves. Now, with revenues growing again next summer as we establish ourselves with more amenities and 5-star reviews, we expect to see revenues continue to grow throughout the year. We're conservatively estimating gross revenues of around $130,000 for the first year, which is very on par because that's what the previous owners were doing before we took it over. And considering that the past owners did in a full year of a $101,000, I think this is more than achievable, and we most likely will actually smash the goal out of the water. Now, given the short-term financing structure right now, that's only a net of about $10,000 for the first year. But that's easily fixable once we refinance out of these short-term loans. So Nathan, what's next? You launched the 3 cabins. What's around the corner?
So this year we're looking to renovate the other 2 cabins. Like we said, we just did the basic renovations and got them up and running, and they're doing pretty well, but we can definitely push that revenue up if we, renovate things like we did with the first cabin. Even if it's only been 2.5 weeks, honestly, I think the numbers are going to show pretty well for the other 2 when we do renovate like the first one. After that, we'll probably do the new construction. So we have 7 acres. We have a good bit of space in the back. So we're probably going to end up doing 3 unique structures. We haven't determined exactly which way we're going with that. Geodomes are kind of the structure that we're leaning towards, but even though there is no zoning technically in this area, when you get to more than 4 doors, you're on the state's radar. So you need to go through them for permitting and everything.
Gotcha. And then what made you decide by doing 3 more doors versus like maybe 1 bigger door?
So the customer that we're trying to attract, and most of the people that are actually coming to visit our property, are couples. We've had like maybe 2 or 3 that don't really fit that criteria. They're like, we want to visit with our kid or something like that. But rest of it has been couples. They're coming out for their anniversary or for a romantic getaway, that kind of thing. So that's the clientele that we're still continually trying to attract. So if we can keep the whole property that way, I think we have a good niche.
Now, here's the real kicker. Nathan has over $500,000 in potential bonus depreciation, the value of the structures and all the upgrades, that he can use against his taxes, effectively wiping out his tax liability and potentially getting back a sizable refund check for all the income taxes that he and his wife has paid over the year. Now, this could mean as much as $75,000 coming back to Nathan and his family. He'll be doing this by using a tax accountant well-versed in real estate and a cost segregation report. If you want to see a rough estimate on your property, consider using my new cost segregation service at rentalcostseg.com, link down below. And also, if you need to set up and talk to a tax accountant, reach out to my guy, Kevin. He's awesome. Now let's talk about the equity gain that he's created in just about 7 months. To do that, we need to calculate the net operating income, also known as NOI. Monthly expenses are lower than other properties because Nathan also learned how to create his own systems and processes, so he doesn't have to pay that 25 to 30% to a property management company. Now somehow the last owners were paying 40% to their property manager. Nathan's monthly unlevered expenses are hovering right around $3,200 a month. This covers taxes, insurance, landscaping, maintenance, cleaning, etc., etc. Normally, we call that our monthly nut. Now, that totals up to be $38,400 in annual expenses. Now, let's just round up because I like to be conservative, and let's say that's approximately $40,000 in expenses to run and manage the 3 cabins. Now, assuming $130,000 in annual revenues, that leaves us with $90,000 in NOI. And if we apply a 7.5% cap rate, which is fair for that market, the property's valuation comes out to around $1.21 million. Considering Nathan acquired it for $865,000 and invested another $250,000, that means as of right now, our cost basis is equal to our current market valuation. Not too bad in just a few months. But this is where things get really interesting as Nathan starts to increase his NOI. If he can boost revenues from $130,000 to, let's say, $155,000 while keeping costs fixed, achievable, but by slowly raising rental rate as this spaces gain popularity, we could see a potential valuation of $1.55 to $1.9 million. Now, Nathan has his work cut out for him if he wants to really push into the 2, 3, potentially even $4 million space where we get into the 6 cap range, but we need strong automation and growth potential. And I believe he can achieve this valuation north of $2 million within the next 2 to 3 years if he continues to execute on our plans and continues to grow his NOI while controlling expenses, which we clearly have done when we were creating the strategy and plan before acquiring the property. But at the end of the day, we really like those kind of numbers. Now, this deal wasn't without its challenges. I know I've glossed over a lot of the other things, otherwise this would be like an hour-long video. Nathan had a tough time securing financing because of the condition of the cabins, and the appraisal didn't come in as high as we hoped, but he persisted, found a creative solution, and closed the deal. All hats off and kudos to Nathan. Now, he also did something that most first-time investors would struggle to do, and most might not even have been able to pull it off at all. He found a property with strong cash flow potential, rehabbed 3 cabins, and successfully launched his first short-term rental business in just shy of 4 months, while working a full-time job and raising a family at home. Well done, sir. Nathan is going to be cash flow positive this month, and he has created over $200,000 in equity by investing back into his own property. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video when Nathan gives us a full tour of phase 2. And if you want to play with the same spreadsheet template Nathan used to analyze this property, join my free community and download the spreadsheet yourself. And if you're serious about investing in income properties like land and high and unique rentals, schedule a call with me and my team to apply for a mentoring program. We'll help you find, plan, and execute on your vision. Now go check out this video on another member, Brian, who land hacked 12 acres in Georgia with a cabin, dome, and container home. Spoiler, he's crushing it.